I remember the first time I sat down with the base chaplain, and we talked about the idea of how things grow, especially in the military, in the area of faith, and how churches have to merge together and organizations have to merge together, and we're on a global front. I mean, we're not talking about one little church in a little community. We're talking about people from all walks of life and all faith and all over the globe, and how do you make them all get along in one little service? Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast, 5-minute videos, 5 days a week. I'm Loren Norris with the Leading Leaders Podcast, and while that may not be a relevant conversation to a lot of people, there are those organizations, like my friend Jacob Miles, when we talked about the idea of putting together these toys for Star Wars. I mean, most of us, we only have the view that it came out of the package, and there's the toy, and it's all good, right? Maybe we battle over whether that particular toy was available at this retailer or that retailer. Can you get it at Walmart or only at Target? Or do you have to get it through a specialty store? Do you have to order it online? Can you only get it in the big stores that are made for, like Disney or Star Wars? And the challenge is that we have to understand too that in the manufacturing of that toy, in the choosing of the plastic bubble that'll go on the outside of that toy, in the cardboard that goes on the backside of that toy, in the packaging that the toy is included in, there are multiple organizations, multiple people, multiple jobs, multiple cultures, multiple religious backgrounds, just to get the package together to put the toy in. We forget when it comes to making our car or creating the medicines that save our lives or developing the procedures that are conducted in the hospital, that sometimes it takes more people from more places around the world than we've ever imagined just to get to the fine point of the final process. Now, see, leaders who live their life so focused on one goal, on one dream, on one vision, on one project, on one task, that they can't see the bigger picture and understand the other people around. They lose sight of how one small decision impacts enormous amounts of people, how one small change in a product or one small change in a process can affect hundreds of thousands of jobs. And maybe we've just decided we're not going to use foam anymore, we're going to use styrofoam. Or we're not going to even use foam or styrofoam backing and packing this toy. We're just going to mold another piece of plastic to go in behind it. And suddenly, the millions of dollars that went from that process to one particular plant changes their plant, changes their annual income, changes their ability to stay in business. Now, that's not my responsibility necessarily as the CEO of the toy company. It's not my job to worry about all those other people's employment. But when we live in a global economy like we do now, things like the fires in Australia are an enormous impact in economy and in structure and in infrastructure. Here's an example. I saw a post, and I don't know what the full validity of this is, but just to think about the ramifications of it, the post said, "Thank you all for all the giving and all the donations that have come in for our fire services through our Facebook online campaign," which you see a lot of those nonprofit campaigns that are being supported on somebody's birthday or whatever. They're promoting the idea of giving to an orphanage or whatever. So there's a campaign on social media to raise funds for the fire services because they're running out of water, they're running out of fuel, they're running out of equipment, they need extra manpower, they need all the help they can get. This fire right now is roughly the size of Texas. That's an enormous fire. That's a large portion of their country. That's a big deal. But see, we can sit here in Dallas and not think anything about it because, well, I don't smell the smoke. I didn't know there was a problem. Or we can just click on the campaign and send a few $100s and say, hey, I did my part. Well, the challenge with that sending that online money is that obviously now you've got a large amount of money. You've got to figure out what the proper process is for dealing with that. And one of the challenges they're finding right now is that it may take, in some cases, as much as 90 days for that money to be in the hands of the people who need to spend it on behalf of the fire services. 90 days. That's a lot of burning, my friends. There's a whole lot of ground that's going to be covered by that fire in 90 days. That's a big deal. But see, it's easy to get caught up in the processes and say, well, that's just the way we do it. That's just the way money works. We gather these little bits and pieces of donations, we accumulate it, we compile it, and after a certain period of time when we feel like all the contributions have stopped coming in and we've accounted for all of them and we know where they came from and we know where they're going, then we'll cut a check for the whole thing, and by then it's kind of too late. See, I think there are a lot of organizations that they get caught up in myopic worldviews. They get caught up in what's going to serve me and my success. What can I focus on today? Now, yes, we need to focus. We need to focus on small minutia like diets and small minutia like where do the pennies go? Because as my friend, multi-billionaire Dr. Jim Leininger once said, if you'll mind the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. If you mind the pennies, the dollars take care of themselves. Most people don't go broke $100,000 at a time. They go broke $10 at a time, $5 at a time, $3 at a time, because they're not paying attention to the little stuff, and the little stuff adds up to the big stuff. Well, it's the same thing with your diet. It's the same thing with your exercise. It's the same thing with your relationships. It's that employee or that friend or that significant other that you haven't had a great conversation with in 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 days, and now all of a sudden you're wondering, why is there friction between us? Why is there pressure between us? Because just like if you mind the pennies, the dollars take care of themselves. If you mind the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, the years, and the decades, they take care of themselves. So we have to be focused on what we're doing right now and what we're doing today, but we also have to not be so myopic that our focus is only on us. Because that's when we become selfish. That's when we lose the ability to consider that the actions we take today will have an impact on the next generation, on people around the globe, on jobs and economies that could be globally affected by one decision we make today. Now, I'm not telling you that it's your responsibility to be only concerned about everyone else in the world. It's not your responsibility to serve everyone else in the world over yourself, over your organization. And you do have to take care of those who are closest to you, who serve your purposes at the highest level. But don't do that to the degree that you make decisions that seem to be in the short term in your best interest and in the long term in the worst interest of everyone else. Myopathy, it is a medical condition. It's what happens when the blood vessels in the optic nerve continue to constrict and you end up basically looking at life through a straw. Myopathy happens to leaders as well when they lose the ability to focus on many things that need to be important and left in a high priority. Maybe you need to delegate those things. Maybe you need to say, listen, how our decisions in manufacturing impact people on another continent, whether or not they have jobs or whether or not they go broke. That's a huge difference to us. But I don't have time to deal with that, so I want to delegate someone to look at the economic impact of our decisions on other cultures. That's a pretty big deal. There's a great documentary I've been watching on Netflix, and I think it's just called Rotten. But they do in-depth looks at various industries and how they impact global economies. One that I watched recently was about bottled water. Very insightful, some really good information. There was a little propaganda. You could see some of their propaganda in it. But when you look at the impact of bottled water in, say, Flint, Michigan, and Abuja, Nigeria, those are 2 totally different places with 2 totally different problems, but bottled water impacts them both in a significant way. Who would have thought that the choice of who you buy your bottled water from or whether you just use tap water could have a global economic impact or a global cultural impact? Well, people who are myopic don't think that way. People who have a larger vision ask the question constantly, how do my small decisions today impact the world and the next generation? So that's my challenge for you today. As leaders, ask yourself, every decision that I make, will it just impact me personally or me and my family, me and my community, me and my organization, me and everybody my organization does business with? Because as a leader, you should be concerned about those things. You have a lot of responsibility at your fingertips. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.